And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. Between now and 3, we're concentrating on sporting culture we can enjoy this Christmas. The brilliant documentary maker Ross Whitaker will be joining us in a while to talk about some of the best sports documentaries and what he's been working on lately. But now we're speaking to the equally brilliant Irish Times sports writer Malachy Clerkin about sports books, which are a great Christmas present for the sports nut in your life. Malachy, you're very welcome to the studio. How is the form?
The form's great, John. Thanks for having me in.
Great to see it, and we'll go through a selection of these sporting books over the next while during our chat. But just to start off, Malachy, because you read a lot of books, you write so well, I read myself. What makes a good sports book, or even a great sports book in your view?
Okay, so I think the first thing is a story.
Yeah.
And the corollary of that is that there's an awful lot of sports books that are autobiographies that forget that the reader wants a story rather than just
I did that.
Somebody's life.
Yes.
An awful lot of sports books are autobiographies that of famous sports people or semi-famous sports people, or in the case of the 2009 Ireland Grand Slam team, everybody. I think they're up to 14 autobiographies out of that one team.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Ronan O'Gara had 2 of them. But what some of them forget is that just because you put a sports person's face on the cover, absolutely that especially in this week of all weeks, that helps getting it off the shelf and into somebody's pile of Christmas presents and get somebody to hand over the $19.99 that it costs. But to make them any good, there has to be a story. There has to be characters. There has to be more than just the sport. I think to make them very good, you have to have more than just the sport. And I think that's what it is. It's actually no different to any book. You know, the successful books, be they fiction or non-fiction, you have to have story, you have to have characters, has to be well told. That's what makes them good.
And you have to have the ability not to put it down.
Yeah. And actually, this year was great for that.
Was it?
Yeah. I every year get a start as early as I can on the sports books because there's just so many of them.
Do you speed read them? Do you give them all due diligence and go through them all?
I give them all due diligence. How I do it generally is I will read absolutely 100 pages of every book.
Okay.
And the ones that I fade out of are the ones that I end up just not really mentioning or not talking about towards the end of the year.
And the ones you're compelled by, then you rank up at the top.
And there was more this year that I absolutely not. Sometimes it's a chore to read to the end.
Yeah.
Because you know what the story has been. You can sort of tell where it's going.
In the middle of the narrative.
This year it was no hardship whatsoever to read to the end of, I would say, upwards of 20 sports books, which makes it a really an outlier almost.
You wonder, is that a creative thing after COVID or during COVID or?
Yeah, that could be part of it. Part of it is just happenstance, circumstance.
Yeah.
Like last year, 2021, 3 of my top 5 sports books of the year were rugby books.
Yeah.
That's never ever the case.
Right.
For whatever reason, I find sometimes rugby books are just they're sometimes a little bit too, I don't know, too bound up in their own mythology a little bit, or there's a lot of, without completely generalising, but a lot of rugby players come from very settled backgrounds, and there's, the greatest challenges in their life was making a rugby team, which doesn't make for a hugely compelling story. But last year you had Keith Earls' books.
Yeah.
Keith Earls' book, which was fantastic because he has a whole life away from rugby. Willie Anderson's book, which was just phenomenal crack and fun, and from a totally different era of rugby. And there was Tom English's
The Lions 97
book. Like, there were 3 fantastic books. And the rugby offerings this year just aren't up there. So what I mean, to go back to the point, is that it's kind of happenstance. They come in gluts. All of these books are independent republics. Like, nobody is...
Even within each sport.
Yeah, exactly.
Does one sport or the other lend itself to a better book, or once again, is it just...
It depends. Certainly, you would have gone, if you go through the sort of classic 100 best sports books of all time type of thing, you probably get 20 boxing books in there. Yeah. Maybe 30. You know, boxing has traditionally
sweet science
just been that thing that, again, you're talking about characters, you're talking about story, you're talking about where these people come from. Like, boxers come from the streets.
Where footballers is harder.
Footballers is harder. Football books have got better though, John.
Have they?
They have, yeah. Like, it's interesting with football in that it's such an enormous sort of cultural force. Football, like, even beyond a sport, like it has grown in our lifetimes way beyond just a global
religion,
a total global, and therefore there are so many stories in it to tell, and that old, like, also footballers are so wealthy now that they don't really need to do their book. Do you know what I mean?
No.
So, like,
they're more likely probably to do a documentary at this stage.
Exactly, a curated documentary. Yeah. You know, their Instagram is their book. You know, they don't need to do like, even like Wayne Rooney did 3 or 4 of them. But, like, think of this current England squad. Will Harry Kane ever do a book?
Not now.
Not now. Like, Jack Grealish might make a good book because there's a bit of a character. I don't know if Raheem Sterling's more likely to do a Players' Tribune piece than a book. And so that sort of famous person's autobiography, like Messi has never done a book, will never do a book.
No, it's possibly historical figures. It's Clough, it's Garincha, it's Morris, those types of stories. Or it's the Miracle of Castle de Sango.
Exactly, yeah. Or and like there's a couple of great soccer books this year. 3 or 4 actually great football books. And there's stories, like, it is Roddy Collins' story. It is Expected Goals, the Rory Smith book about the data revolution in soccer.
Well, let's get to them. So the Rodfather, Roddy Collins, Paul Howard, and in a good way, I haven't picked this up at all because, once again, we're trying to encourage people to find something for the Christmas stocking for their loved one. But this seems to be a laugh from one minute to the next. Yeah,
like, this is the funniest sports book I've read in a long time. Right. And I can't fathom how there'll be a funnier one for a long time to come. It is just so much
relentless storytelling.
Relentless storytelling. That's what it is. It's you know, the way that, like, that some books are structured, you know, and then that season we did this, and then we played them, and then we did this, and there might be a story or two, but a lot of it is kind of narrative. This is Roddy's story propelled by yarns, and I described it actually in the paper the other day as it's like a Naked Gun movie for anecdotes. If you don't like this anecdote, don't worry. There's another one coming in the next paragraph, and it's just story after story after story.
Does that blend? Because when you think
it does, yeah, it's great. Like, the thing that we should always talk about when it comes to sports books, the ghostwriter is so important.
Yeah, because Martin O'Neill has written his own, apparently.
He has, and do you know what? It isn't bad.
Right.
Martin O'Neill has kind of dirtied his bib here in this country because he seems to be very thin-skinned.
And Tony O'Donoghue interviews.
There's a bit of that, but there's also, every time, you can't really ask Martin O'Neill about managing Ireland without his shoulders going and his hackles getting up. But actually, if you get away from the Ireland stuff, Martin O'Neill's book isn't bad at all.
Okay.
It's really not bad at all, and he's an intelligent guy and is able to tell his own story. But a ghostwriter is important, not just for... very important for how the book hangs together, how the structure of it, how the narrative goes, but also because a sports writer, a ghost writer, gets the subject to talk about the things that they mightn't even think are interesting. And in Roddy Collins's book, like, there so much of it is his life as a footballer, his life as a football manager, his life as a normal human being, as a plasterer, his life as a family man, all of this sort of stuff.
Does he come across as lovable?
Lovable would be going too far, actually. Right. Because he doesn't paint himself as lovable, actually. Likeable, certainly. Unhateable, I would say, would be more accurate. Lovable would be overdoing it because he falls out with loads of people and he's very strident, and sure, look, everybody knows Roddy Collins, and it's all here. But yeah, unhateable, I think, would be the better description of it.
Right.
But it's so much fun. It really it's like you beat through it and you'll enjoy every minute.
Put a smile on your face for later in the day. Yeah, I picked up this the other day, Malachy, two brothers, Jonathan Wilson, on the life and times of Bobby and Jackie Charlton. And I kind of sifted through it. So it's quite like the rest of Jonathan Wilson's books. And there's like a history in there. Yes. There's stuff I wouldn't have known. Within the first 2 pages, it's the Wembley Stadium, used to be known as the Empire Stadium. Right. I never knew this. Talk about the Jack Charlton 86 chaos of Bob Paisley and all that kind of thing. So I obviously it's not first person, but it's going to be one of these books that I think is going to be very much insightful from a perspective of looking behind the curtain and seeing the relationship that they had, because it's obvious they were chalk and cheese,
It's one I missed now, but it's on my list to sort of go back to in the new year, but I've heard very good things about it. I think I was not put off it, but I didn't grab at it straight away because I read a really good book on the two of them called Jack and Bobby by Leo McKinstry back in, do you know what, it could be like 02 or 03. Right. And I hadn't gone back to it since. But look, as you say, Jonathan Wilson is as good a soccer writer and a good soccer historian as there is around. So yeah, I'll be really looking forward to that.
Speaking of Bobby and Man United, did you read the 1999 book?
I did. Now,
Matt Dickinson, this is.
With Matt Dickinson. I came to this going, I was always going to love this, because in 1999 I was a fairly fervent Man United fan.
Right.
I describe myself these days as a kind of a lapsed Catholic Man United fan.
The bedspread's gone.
The bedspread is gone. I'm kind of interested in them at the minute because they're shite. And I quite like the struggle, but I really kind of got bored of them in the late Ferguson years and all that sort of stuff. But in 1999 you were
hardcore.
Oh my God! And I remember every game of that run in. And
where are you for the New Camp game?
Well, I was a barman in what was the Mean Fiddler on Wexford Street, and couldn't get out of working that night. And we had it on the big screen. I'll never forget it, because I was working in the upstairs bar, and a really dear friend of mine who's another Man United fan was working in the downstairs bar, and he came racing up to the place was absolutely jammed. With 500 people in it, and he fought his way through the crowds, and we hugged each other when the Solskjaer's goal went in. But anyway, look, that's all as a preamble to saying that I came to this book knowing like Matt Dickinson's a great writer and a really good soccer journalist, and was there at the heart of it, and I knew that I would love this book. Or put it this way, I knew that if I was only warm on this book, then I couldn't possibly recommend it to normal people.
Or Man United fans who are looking for something for Christmas.
Yeah, but I actually gave.
Is there new stuff in it? Because that's what you want.
There's so much new stuff in it that you wouldn't have known.
Okay.
That you would. I didn't know that Ferguson basically got sacked in the summer of '98.
What?
Now it lasted an afternoon.
Right.
But that basically he was hauled into a meeting by Martin Edwards and told, we don't really know if your signings have been very good, and he wanted to buy, was it that he wanted to buy Dwight York? He wanted to buy Dwight York. And they were saying, no, your signings have been crap lately. We're not giving you the money for Dwight York. And Ferguson said, well, no, you have to. It's not on. We need an extra striker. And they went kind of no. And he says, well, are you firing me and they said, well, if you want to leave, you can leave. And so basically he had either resigned / been sacked. It lasted about 6 hours. And then he climbed down and rang Martin Edwards and said, okay, we'll stay on. We'll see how we get on here. But yeah, that was in the summer of 98, during the 98 Amazing. World Cup. Going into that season. But the thing was that I read the book and I actually gave it to a Liverpool supporting friend of mine and said, look, I think this book is fantastic. but I'm completely biased because I lived every minute of this. You read it and tell me what you think. And he came back to me about a month later because like he obviously wouldn't read it straight away.
Sure.
And he said, no, it's brilliant. It's very, very good. Really a top class book.
Very good.
So I can genuinely recommend it to anybody of
fan,
any stripe. Yeah.
Right. Expected goals, you touched upon there, Rory Smith. So the story of how data conquered football and changed the game forever. XG is something I kind of get into a sweat when I hear that phrase.
Yeah.
Because, look, I know you need to know it, but I don't think it tells a picture of the whole of football. But does this book, like a bit like Inventing the Pyramid or Jonathan Wilson's book, does this book make it understandable?
Totally. Because the thing with it was, and I'm exactly the same as you, like if I had to take my 67-year-old mother and explain XG to her, I wouldn't be able to. You know, I vaguely know the broad definition, but like, no, we don't.
This is not football.
You know, exactly. But the premise of the book is sort of twofold. It's not about the numbers. Your initial thought would be, this is a book about numbers in football and who gives a shit, really. It's not about that. It's about the people behind the numbers. So that's the one thing. And it tells the story of these people. And like, it's so new. Like, these people didn't really exist in football 20 years ago. But in telling their story, it also shows how everything that we watch now in football, we don't know this, but it is completely shaped by these numbers.
By data.
By data. And nothing that we watch in top level professional soccer happens by accident.
So Mbappe and Messi ahead of Saturday and Sunday's final at 3:00. It's all, so people like, are there people, nerds in today, rooms with charts and all this kind of stuff?
Today in the Argentina camp, the data analysts have already worked out, having watched Mbappe last night and watched how he left Hernandez exposed. All those numbers have been crunched, and we will see in the World Cup final the fruits of that analysis. But it's even more than that, John. Like, it's, I was thinking of this watching the World Cup. Like, how many goals from outside the box have we seen?
It's very interesting because I watched I'm a nerd. I watched the 1978 tournament.
Yes.
All the goals on YouTube about 3 days ago, and nearly all the goals are from outside the box. Because
of data analysis, in top level professional football now, you're essentially not allowed to shoot from outside the box.
Maybe the free kick from the Mexico guy, was that?
Free kick from the Mexico guy, Rashford's free kick, Messi's goal against Mexico, and Tchouaméni's goal against England. There's less than 10, I'd say. You're not allowed to shoot from outside the box because data has shown, why would you do that? And I was even laughing at Croatia's the second goal against Croatia in the first semi-final, where all the TV commentary were going, why are they faffing about at the corners here? Why are they trying to take these corners short? Why do they not just lump it into the box? Because Croatia have decided, their data analysis all through the tournament is, this is how we take our corners. We play it short, we move the people around inside, and that's how that one fell down, and we look stupid.
And Spain, the data must have really, you have to have 1,000 passes. Yeah. But then there's the data bit, and then there's the natural bit, and the balance.
So this is the thing. Like, you can agree with all of that or not.
Yeah.
But the fact is that it's there, and this tells the story about how it got there, and it goes through year after year and person after person, culminating in like the sort of crescendo of the book is Liverpool winning the Premier League, the COVID Premier League, which is sort of shown in this book as the triumph of the nerds, essentially. That the analysis in Liverpool all comes from everything they do.
The Moneyball theory, is it?
It's essentially soccer's Moneyball.
Yeah, okay.
And Moneyball is present all the way through it and all that sort of stuff. I find it fascinating. I must say, I genuinely...
You've convinced me to have a look at it.
It made me watch football differently.
Okay, interesting. Messi, Ronaldo, one rivalry, two goats in the era that remade the world's greatest game by Joshua Robinson and Jonathan Clegg. I haven't read this. I don't know much about it.
I haven't come across it either, I know those two guys.
They read they did the club, and that was almost like the cheat sheet on the Premier League.
Yes.
So because that was so good, That's probably worth checking out. Now, GAA. There's no bias here, folks, about Arthur James O'Dea and Limerick and Autobiography in 9 Lives. He did his interview with Ger of the Off the Ball stable. But you correctly described this, Malachy, as a video game. It is a video game. I picked it up last night. I started reading the chapter in the 90s because it's the most compelling time in Limerick until now. And it is just, I'm almost playing and then game's over and then get into another game. It's just fascinating. It's so well put together, so well researched and written. And obviously the story's there, you know.
I must say I loved it. I was kind of beguiled by the structure of it.
Yeah.
Because you don't come across much new stuff.
Yeah.
When you read an awful lot of sports books, you know, they all tend to fall into their categories eventually. And I'm really even only talking in terms of structure here. But I was really taken with this. Like, I don't know Arthur at all. Obviously, you guys know him very well. So I have no bias here.
Sure.
And I read this in around September or so, and I just thought it was a brilliant idea to tell the story of Limerick hurling through biographies of 9 people, 9 hurlers essentially. And I've said in a couple of reviews that actually it's sort of 10 biographies because Arthur's is in here too.
Right.
Arthur's family are in here. Like, Arthur's from Sligo, his father's from Limerick. His father left Limerick 50 years ago. But still passed on the sickness for Limerick hurling to his
which we all
Sligo
have in our own
family.
way.
Yeah,
And that's
100%.
You know, for me, it's my dad was Clare. You know, so I carry that.
And so it was like what people the other great book on Limerick hurling is literally called Unlimited Heartbreak,
which is now redundant.
well, talk about 2 bookends, like, you know, they're like, and it's quoted liberally through here, to tell the story of the rise from unlimited heartbreak to their sort of bestriding the hurling world like a colossus now, the way they are. You know, there's clearly a book there, but how do you do it?
Yeah,
and this is like, in some ways, like sometimes it's more like a scrapbook. You know, like, because there'll be an interview with Ger Hegarty and it'll be like 100 words, and then there'll be a bit with Nicky Quaid's ma, and then there'll be 3 headlines from a day during the 1998 Munster Hurling Championship, and then there'll be like a poem, and then and all of that could be really discombobulating, or it could be like, it's a big risk to take.
It is a risk
with narrative
with
structure.
your first book as well.
With your first book, but like, you can make a balls of that so easily. Like, you can make that borderline unreadable if you're not very careful with it. And he was, and it just came out brilliantly. I was really, really taken with it. I really liked it.
We're reviewing Sports Book of the Year with Malachy Clerkin of the Irish Times, and that's a Hero Books book. That's Liam Hayes' company.
Yeah.
And they play a very important role, I think, for like new writers and also for GA stories that might not get the big publishers behind them, for example. Like, I read Martin McHugh's one on Leitrim in 94 was really, really good, you know.
I read the Gemma O'Connor, the Cork Camogie players one, written by her and Sinead Farrell, which I really enjoyed now. It was, again, another hero book. The story of, you know, Gemma O'Connor won, I'm going to get this wrong, I think 9 All-Irelands and 11 All-Stars, or the other way around. Sorry. But the numbers aren't exactly important, but she's like a, you know, linchpin of the great Cork camogie teams of the last sort of 15 years.
Is this Why Not a Warrior, is it?
Why Not a Warrior? Yeah, so named because she's in the Defence Forces.
Okay,
but also, you know, talks about, she does something really interesting in it. And this is where I go back to what I was saying earlier about the ghostwriter side of things. Like, Gemma O'Connor is a gay woman, and you can sense from the book that she doesn't want to make a big deal of it because it was never a big deal in her house, or like, she had no great sort of tortured coming out moment or anything like that. And, you know, she's married and all of that sort of stuff. But it's not a big revelation in the book. but it's always there. And that's really, it's done really skillfully by the ghostwriter, in that she keeps sort of just lacing it through it, like, talking about her relationship, and, in the same way as, like the responsibilities of being an inter-county player kind of affect your home life and all of that. It's just her home life is with her wife. And it's not, as I say, there's never a big deal made of it, but it's not hidden away either. And it's not, I've read plenty of books with sports people talking about being gay, and they do one page on it and they say, this is my gay story, and then we move on. And that's their way of not making a big deal of it. But it's a huge part of your life. You're like, your relationship with your nearest and dearest is a big part of your life, and especially as an amateur GAA player. And it's really, really skillfully done throughout the book. And I really liked it. It was another hero book. There's an awful lot of them.
Yeah, no, and they do really, the county stuff is very good as well. Where they do
Game of My Life.
Yeah, right,
Jerry McCarthy did one with the Cork women's footballers, which is very good. Like they're such an amazing story. Like Juliette Murphy and Valerie Mulcahy and the rest of them. It was very good as well.
Zach Moradi and Niall Kelly.
Yeah.
Life begins in Leitrim, from Kurdistan to Croke Park. Even like the title itself is interesting.
Yeah. It's like Zach Moradi has had an amazing life. There's a brilliant intro to the book. Like the first page of it, I'm going to misquote it now, but it's along the lines of, I was born in October 1991, and the next day Iraq bombed Kuwait.
Yeah.
So basically he was born into a life of war, and up until he was 11, he lived in refugee camps in and around Iraq and Iran, and eventually got to move to Leitrim as their whole family as refugees when he was 11, and but landed in Leitrim with no English, no sense of, like, there's really the lovely bit where they're on the bus from the refugee camp to the airport, and it's a small minibus, and the Moradi family, I think there's 8 of them, are on this bus. There's another family in the seats across from them, and there's a sort of a single woman just up from them, and they're all going to the airport. The family of 4 are going to Australia. The single woman's going to Canada. They're going to Leitrim, and it could just as easly have been swapped over. Like, they could have been going to Australia, the family of 4 could have been going to Leitrim, the single woman could have been going to Canada, or whatever it was. And it's just that there's it's a beautiful scene of them kind of heading off way out into the world, having literally no idea where they were going or where they would land.
Is it an inspiring story?
Yeah, it is. Like, there's a lot of politics in it. Like, they don't get to Leitrim until about your good 111, 112 pages in, before you arrive in Ireland, before there's ever any mention of the GAA, before there's ever any, it's not.
Does it portray the GAA in a good light in terms of its?
Yeah, not only does it portray the GAA in a good light, like a really good light, like that's, as he says in it at one stage, all of the friends that I have, all the relationships I have in Ireland are through the GAA.
Okay.
So, like, they live in Leitrim for a few years, and then they actually move to Tala, and he joins Thomas Davis, but he goes back down to Leitrim to hurl with Leitrim because that's how he got into it and all of that sort of stuff. But it actually, beyond the GAA, it actually really portrays how Ireland deals with refugees in a really positive light. We always hear the other side, and obviously we don't do enough. I think plenty of people would agree that we don't do enough to make it welcoming. But Zach Moradi's story, he'd say it and has said it himself plenty of times, is a story of like welcoming and good news and
good humanity,
hope and good humanity, and the country did right by him and his family.
So speaking of good humanity, after the storm, Damien Lawler.
Yeah.
Now this was touching upon, was the GAA through COVID? Was that the
essentially how the GAA got through COVID. But like it's more than that as well. And I think like even that sort of subject matter sounds very off-putting. And I must say, I kind of know Damien Lawler from being on the beat from over 20 years. With another name with another author, I don't know if I'd have really dug into this. But Damien does brilliant books about, he just gets ordinary GAA people to tell their stories. And their stories are far more interesting than even they give themselves credit for. And so this was, you know, he finds like GAA people that nearly died of COVID in the early days. There's a lot from the inner sanctum in Croke Park about how they managed to keep the whole show on the road, how they managed to get the championship on, the political machinations that went behind getting the 2020 championship.
The December All-Irelands.
The December All-Irelands, all that sort of stuff. Like they came very, very close to not happening, and closer than I think we all really imagined at the time. And essentially, you know, the government basically said, these have to happen and we'll pay for it. Which was kind of a huge thing at the time. There's just so much humanity and so many stories in this book about the last 2 years. But I totally get how people would kind of go, I don't know if I could really be arsed reading.
Or it's like reading about, Leo and Pascal Donahue and people in Neffet, you know.
Yeah, exactly. All that sort of stuff. But the thing is, I think this is nearly a book that you would come back to in 10 years.
Okay.
And appreciate it even more then than you would
This
now.
is what it was like. I think at the moment we're still in the roaring 20s phase, aren't we? We're all going out this week.
Well, we are a little bit, but we're also, I was realising this during the week, like, it's really not that long ago. Like,
no.
Like
it's a blur, I think.
It's a total blur. But I actually, because I was...
A year ago, there was restrictions.
This is what I was just about to say, because I've been writing a review of the sporting year for the Times that's going to be out next week or after Christmas. And I went back and realised, like, we started the year under restrictions. Like, the week before the Alliance Leagues, you were still only allowed 5,000 people at a match. A fortnight before the Six Nations, you're only allowed 5,000 people at a match. That's this year. You know, so I think this is a book that will really, of all the books that we're going through here, will stand the test of time,
right,
beyond everything.
Okay,
as a
historical portrait.
Yeah, and it's a really important book for that.
Yeah, rugby. So Second Sight, Ian McKinley and Jerry Thornley.
Yeah,
this is a story. This
is a story, and I like as I said at the start, like the rugby books last year, there was a glut of brilliant ones, and there just isn't that glut this year, but there is one sort of shining star above all the other rugby books around, and it's this one. Like, people will know broadly. I knew broadly Ian McKinley's story. He was of the same age and vintage as, say, Ian Madigan in the Leinster Academy. He actually played GA with Ian Madigan in Kilmacud Crokes, like, coming up together. So he's that age. But when he was in the Leinster Academy, or he was playing with UCD at the time, and a teammate stood on his face in a ruck accidentally, and he lost his eye. He eventually lost his eye. And I think I vaguely knew that he sort of had a bit of a struggle, but he found his way back and eventually, you know, moved to Italy, and eventually played for Italy in the Six Nations.
And then he's the Irish guy who plays for Italy.
He's the Irish guy who plays for Italy with the goggles. Was essentially it. Like, his story is absolutely extraordinary. And I just didn't know the half of it. Like, the mental troubles he went through, the sort of tangible wars that he had to have with various associations like the IRFU, the RFU, the French Rugby Union, to be allowed to play with these protective goggles. He initially went to Italy to coach because his rugby career was declared dead, and fell into a sort of a funk of depression. By pure happenstance, his brother and sister-in-law came over for a weekend, And him and his brother went for a walk one day, and he was in bad form and really moody, and he snapped at him, and his brother could, as only brothers can, sort of saw through it and said, right, what are we going to do here? And he says, look, I can't accept that I'm finished playing rugby. And he was like 21 or 22 at the time. Like, that's my life. Like, I can't accept it. And so his brother, who's a really sort of calm, forensic type of dude, essentially went home and mapped out a plan and said, right, here's how we get.
So when you're reading this, you get in an empathy with Ian McKinley.
Oh my God.
You're getting connected as opposed to the person on the page.
Like, it's a story of pure defiance,
right.
Really. Like, his rugby career should not have happened after he lost his eye. Like, by any reasonable measure, that should have been that.
Okay.
And he not only sort of was able to swim back upstream, but to come back and to play in the Six Nations for anybody, but for as the Italian out half, as he did, was really extraordinary. And it's a really brilliant book. It's done with Jerry Thornley from the Irish Times, and it's it's probably, of all of these, I'm looking through the list, it's definitely the most amazing human story.
Okay.
There, you know, that just, as I say, a story of not taking no for an answer, and really, really brilliant now.
An honourable mention to Ali Donnelly's Scrum Queens, I think.
Yeah. Like, this was a book that kind of just disappeared when it came out. Came out in the summer. I think it was around the time of the Women's Euros, this Women's Euro soccer tournament. And it sort of came out and kind of disappeared without trace a little bit. But it's like, talk about an important social document. Like, it's the story of the rise of women's rugby, and like going way back. Like, women's rugby existed
In Ireland or everywhere?
Everywhere.
Okay.
Women's rugby existed like way back towards the end of the 19th century, and just kind of faded from view because of the patriarchy, because of, you know, once we codified sport, we you know, as societies, we put all our energies into boys playing sport and put none into girls playing sport, and, you know, the story is old as time. And then its rise over the last sort of 2 to 3 decades. Ali Donnelly runs Scrum Queens. She's been a tireless advocate for women's sport and women's rugby especially, so there's obviously no better person to tell this story, but it's really like it's exhaustive. It covers so many bases, and another like another really important book, like, because, you know, these stories don't get told enough, and women's sport is only growing, and it is one of the better things to have happened to sport in the last decade, is this sort of gradual growth of women's sport and the gradual acceptance. And there's obviously still not enough of it, but it is growing, and rugby is part of that. And this will.
People are awake to it now.
People are awake to it,
Their
but it's
eyes
all.
open.
Sponsors are awake to it.
Yeah.
That's how these things grow. The filthy lucre, cash money, sponsors are getting
Think
into
about
it.
the Irish women's team, Sky Cadbury.
You know, and but like, that's how everything grows, and eventually it becomes unimpeachable and unanswerable, and like, God hasten the day for all of that.
Other sports. Phil.
Yeah.
Golf books.
Yeah.
Are quite rare. Phil Mickelson. Alan Shipnook.
I love this now. There is so this book created a bit of buzz and sort of controversy a way back, maybe around early 2022 or maybe late 2021, when Shipnook actually released a bit of it. Essentially, they did an interview about the Saudis and about Live Golf and all of that sort of stuff, the coming dawn of Live Golf. I don't think it was even called Live at that stage. And where Phil calls the Saudis scary MRFers. And the thing is, it gives a different view of. It gives a bad impression of what the book is. The book isn't a hatchet job at all.
No, it's not.
At all.
Did you know much about Phil? Did you learn a lot from this book?
I learned loads about Phil, and I would have known a fair bit.
Okay.
Like I would have, like he'd be somebody I would have followed plenty over the years. But you still, like, I knew there was a dodgy thing with gambling and insider trading and all of that. I didn't know the granular bits and pieces about it. I knew as well that he was known as this hugely generous, hugely popular guy with sort of rank and file people.
People's champion.
The people's
Arnold
champion.
Palmer of the new generation.
But again, didn't know the granular stuff of how he treated people.
Because this had loads of anecdotes. Is this similar to the Roddy Collins book in a way?
To an extent. This is a biography. We don't get many biographies.
Yes.
You know, you don't get many.
The Tiger Woods one a few years ago.
Yeah, the Armin Catane one. Yeah, and it was good. This is way more crack now.
Okay.
This is way more fun. It has, like, and I've been saying this since I read it first in May. The first chapter.
The first chapter. Yeah.
The first chapter of it is maybe the best chapter of a sports book I've read in years.
It's fantastic.
Because essentially Shipnock goes to 30 well-known golf people. Like Paul McGinley's in there, Jim Furyk's in there, Matt Kuchar, all these guys are in there. Tell me your favourite Phil story. And he just, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph for about 15 pages, their favourite Phil stories. And it's so much fun.
Yeah, there's parts of it disappointed me now, I have to say, about the maybe the intricacies of the majors, and maybe we're glossed over a little bit because there's so much entertainment and so many stories to tell.
The one thing was, I did think it got a wee bit too, and this is the problem with all sports books, essentially, that they got a wee bit too run of play. And then in 2006 he did, and then he did, and then in that year's British Open, and then in that year's PGA, blah blah blah, and you get on a bit. You fall into the trap of getting onto a treadmill with that sort of stuff. But as I say, we don't get many biographies. We don't get many sports people who are worthy of a biography, that have enough heft outside of the sporting field to carry a biography.
Anybody could read the Phil book. You don't have to be a sports fan to read the Phil book and be entertained by it.
Yeah.
Ty Coakley, The Game, A Journey into the Heart of Sport. What's this about?
So this is my favourite book of the year.
Right.
This is like if I'm to keep one book before the rest go to the charity shop. This is it. Like, so Ty Coakley is he's from Cork. He's a novelist. He's an essayist. He's a poet. People would read his stuff in like literary collections, like The Stinging Fly and stuff like that. But he's also a big GA man, a big sports fan. Like he was a minor All-Ireland winning hurling captain with Cork back in the late 70s. He played junior soccer for years. He's a sports nut, and he's a beautiful writer. And this is a collection of essays. Basically, it's I think it's 13 essays, and it's sport. It's an attempt to understand sport, an attempt to understand his relationship with sport, people's relationship with sport, what it means, all that big dumb question stuff, you know. And so the stuff is as broad as his relationship with his father. There's a brilliant essay called Kisses, where he realizes that like his father met him with a kiss after he won a match one time, and that he basically spent the rest of his sporting career looking for that kiss again. And maybe his writing career as well. And like, he's clearly very well read. There's an awful lot of inserts here from other books that have tried to understand sport, or tried to understand like misogyny in sport, or the connection between crowds and players and all of that sort of stuff. And actually, if I have any sort of criticism of the book, is that he nearly takes in too much outside information to back up his arguments, because he's such a beautiful writer.
Does it come together, or is one?
It really does. Yeah.
In and out of it if you want.
You can do that.
Yeah.
But he's such a beautiful writer because he's such a humble voice. His sort of writing style is really, it's kind of pondering. It's kind of it's at no stage sort of saying, well, this is the definitive take on sport. This is how you should feel about sport.
That sounds like the ad for it.
Yeah, exactly. But what it is him sort of sitting down and kind of with great sort of humility and curiosity, trying to work his way through what sport is and what it means. It's one of my favourite sports books for years now. It's really, really up there.
It's a big endorsement. The best there never was. I picked this up the other day again on Jan Ullrich, the 1997 Tour de France winner. Daniel Friebe has done a lot of graft on this, a lot of interviews, fascinating story, almost eclipsed in a way by Lance Armstrong. And it's when I'm having read a bit of it last night, once again, I was curious about the key thing with all these things is curiosity to keep going.
Yeah, I'm listening to it actually on an audiobook. I do that with a few books a year. Just when I'm not, if I've tired of podcasts, I plough through a couple of these on audiobook, and it's the one that I'm on at the minute. But say it's very good. Yeah, it's so far now. I'm only 3 or 4% into it, but it's good.
15 Rounds in the Wilderness, Dave Hannigan on Ali, another one of these.
Yeah, like Dave Hannigan has, this is it, I think it's his third Ali book. His first one was When Ali Fought in Croke Park, which is one of the great Irish sports books. And like anybody that's into Irish sports books should have, I think it's called The Big Fight. And it's When Ali Fought in Croke Park. His second one was about the drama in the Bahamas, Ali's last fight, and this carries on from there. So his last fight was 1981. This covers the 15 years between his last fight and him lighting the flame in Atlanta in 1996. And so each year has a chapter. There's 15 rounds, so 81, 82, 83. That's right. The 15 rounds. And it's written in a really interesting way in that it is literally like it tells the story of everything Ali did in each of those years. It's actually hard to describe in a way. It's like, it's not, there's no judgment from the writer in it. There's no kind of everything is written clean, as in he went to do this, he went to open a kids hospital somewhere, and it just tells the stories of everything that Ali did, and it's really funny in places because Ali was so funny, but it's so sad. The overarching thing in it is so sad because, you know, some of it is Ali trying to make money when the money was starting to dry up. Some of it is Ali getting swindled by some of the hangers-on, but also some of it is his fading health. You know,
deterioration over time.
Over those 15 years, he went from, you know, a slow boxer.
You got to be in the right mindset, maybe, but worth picking up if you are.
Really worth picking up, because as I say, it's not all downer,
right?
At all. It's very, very, very funny, and he's such a compelling character. But like we said at the start, it's story and character.
Look, this has been a brilliant flavour, Malachy. Thank you so much.
Whoa, we can't finish. We didn't do Kelly.
Did we not do Kelly?
We didn't do Kelly.
Well, there you go. The Irish On Post Sports Book of the Year.
If Kelly ever sees me, she'll punch me in the mouth.
Well, she might see you at the Sportsman of the Year Awards, Irish Times Sportsman of the Year on Tuesday.
Yeah. Kelly, yeah. So Kelly Harrington's
Roddy Doyle.
With Roddy Doyle.
Leaving the best to the last.
Yeah, well, now not
the
best in my, but still a very, very good book. Like, she's such a brilliant character. He's a great writer.
Justice Done?
Justice Done, yeah. Like, it's not the book you expect. I thought it would be funnier because Kelly is so hilarious. Like, there's plenty of funny bits in it, but what comes through it is her warmth more so than her humour. And just the humanity of her, and it's really good. Like people should read Kelly's book. It's very, very good.
Well, Malachy Clerkin of the Irish Times, an absolute gent. Appreciate it.
Not at all.
Happy Christmas to you and yours.
And yours.
And we'll look forward to chatting to you soon.
Excellent. Thanks, John.
Malachy Clerkin of the Irish Times there, reviewing the sports books of 2022. You know what to do over the next week, folks. We're back after this.